Welcome to the Texas Private Schools Association's Zoom call recording. Join us on the second and fourth Tuesdays of every month at 11 a.m. Central Time to hear a recap of issues of relevance to private schools in Texas. I'm very thankful to Stephen Goodspeed and Dustin Gaines, who are going to kick us off today to talk about school safety. I've gotten a lot of questions about these programs, namely school marshal and school guardian. I hear about them in the Capitol a lot, and there's a lot of confusion about them. And these guys seem to be the ones that know the most about this. So Stephen Goodspeed has practiced law for 22 years and is licensed in Texas, Georgia, and Oklahoma. He regularly represents clients nationwide in the area of nonprofit and for-profit transactional law, focusing primarily on churches, private schools, camps, outdoor recreational organizations, colleges, and universities. So that is Stephen. And Dustin Gaines heads the firm's litigation department, and his practice is focused on litigation, major investigations, and crisis management related to churches and private schools. Dustin has several years' experience as a private school administrator and has dedicated his law practice exclusively to school and church-based crisis management and litigation matters. So what we're going to do is they're going to start out and talk about the legal framework for these programs and the experience that they've had helping schools and churches with this. Then we're going to transition. I'll take a few questions there. We'll transition over to Jeff Potts and Drew Sells from Cypress Christian School out in Houston. And they're going to talk the more pragmatic, logistical way that you do primarily the Guardian program in a private school. So Jeff has been very generous with his time and has talked to a lot of schools about this, talk them through what you need to think about to get started on this. And we'll hear a little bit about that too after we hear the legal part. So let me see if I can do this correctly. Okay, so Stephen, do you want to take it away?
I will. Thank you very much, Laura. And I want to thank the Texas Private Schools Association for hosting today's webinar. And thought we would start off by looking at some of the objectives that we had for today and trying to pull all the information together. We want to look at the statutory authority and legal background regarding both the school marshal and guardian program laws. And we'll be doing that in a broad overview. No, we're not going to do some statutory deconstruction and get really down into the nitty gritty, but we'll certainly have enough information here available too that once you print the slides out, you can do some further research in those areas, but hope to give enough background there to show you the basis for both those programs and also look at some of the differences and distinctions between the two programs. You'll see the school marshal program is more stringent, less flexible, and the guardian program is more flexible for sure and less expensive, but maybe invites some opportunity for more choices and decisions to be made by the schools that implement that program. And of course, we'll end with the practical considerations and issues that Cypress Christian Schools has navigated in implementing the school guardian program. And of course, I didn't want to start off too soon without giving a disclaimer here. So we are attorneys, and that next slide will show you that we're not able to render formal legal advice today, and we're not establishing an attorney-client relationship and all the things that you guys already know. Laws can change and situations can vary, and so you need to work with experienced legal counsel and others to kind of make sure that you get the right program for you all. And we're also not here to advocate for either one of these programs. We're certainly aware of the culture surrounding guns and the differences in inner cities and smaller communities and the different situations that you all have to navigate. We have to help our clients in a multitude of different circumstances try to figure out whether they want to implement either one of these programs and how to best do it. So we're aware of the issues surrounding that and mindful of that, but want to show you these two options that are available and how you might be able to take advantage of those. Some of the issues that we face are kind of inherent in this next slide. I'm going to turn 50 here pretty soon. And when I hear about the Pennsylvania Amish schoolhouse or Virginia Tech shooting, these things echo, to me from that time period. And I think some of these are probably familiar to you all as well. And you're not surprised that there's a rapid kind of legislative response to some of these tragedies. And you'll see that in some of the statutes. They're kind of, I wouldn't say that they're all over the place, but I mean, it's not like you can go to just one place and find the basis, for implementing these programs. And so I think, just recognizing the patchwork statutory framework kind of came from the tragedies that existed at the time. The Guardian Plan was created in 2007, got more formalized really in 2012, and certainly the Marshall Plan created in 2013 with Sandy Hook, another name that probably is, at least vaguely familiar to you all. And so I just wanted to point out, if some of you all are struggling to kind of get your mind wrapped around sort of how this works with the prohibition of guns in schools and all of that, there's a reason for that. It's kind of a patchwork kind of a deal here. The issue of arming Texas teachers was addressed in an article that was published June 8th, 2022. And there's been a host of others that have looked at this too, but some of the public school data, and I could have probably set this up a little better with tracking, this a little bit, over time, but you can see that this has been a growing phenomenon of implementing the school marshal program and the Guardian program. I won't read the slide to you, but you can see kind of the implementation of both of those programs as it exists now. And certainly in our own practice, it's focused on private schools in the state of Texas and otherwise. We've certainly seen an increase in interest in the especially the school Guardian program, and with the recent Uvalde school massacre and that kind of thing, we've just seen an increased interest in and certainly in our rural areas, with the different response times and those kinds of things. So wanted you all to be aware of that as well, that this is the increasing interest in this, and hopefully today's presentation will sort of help answer some of the questions that you all have. I'm going to hand this over to Dustin to give an initial overview of the Guardian Plan legal basis.
All right. Thank you, Stephen. And just to echo what Stephen said, thank you so much to Laura and to the association for having us today. If you have any questions at the end of this, Laura will have our email addresses that she'll put up on the screen, and we would just welcome you to reach out, ask any questions that you have. Every situation is going to be completely different. And when you get started, it's very good to have somebody in your corner that understands these things, can ask questions and all of those things. So I just wanted to mention that at the very beginning. But we're going to talk first about the school Guardian Plan. So we're going to talk primarily about the two different setups that the Texas legislature has given us for protecting students. Guardian Plan would be the first one, and then Marshall Plan. We're going to distinguish those, talk about what the differences are and why most places use Guardian and what you need to be thinking of just because of the flexibility. So just like the slide says, it's the least formal and the least expensive option. And what it is your governing board of your school is going to authorize a policy, and you're going to authorize certain people, and you're going to establish internally your own criteria for what training is going to look like to have teachers or staff armed and prepared to defend should an incident pop up. So a lot of flexibilities on the school. It comes from the school board down, and there's individual authorization. It's, akin to, an internal permission slip that you're giving an individual to be able to carry a weapon and keep kids safe while they're at school. So that third bullet point, though, is really important on this because of the flexibility that the Guardian Plan has. So the third bullet point, schools must make sure that Guardian personnel are properly trained and have at a minimum a Texas license to carry. So the statutes are very vague on what type of training goes into a school guardian. So if you have an individual at your school, faculty or staff member, you feel like they would be a good fit, they have the right demeanor, they have the right reputation, the right, performance history in the school where they would be trusted to have a weapon and be able to keep it safe, away from access from kids and all of those things. There is at a minimum a requirement for a Texas license to carry. And that really is all that is statutorily required. If you are a handgun instructor in Texas, and you want to obtain an additional certification as a handgun instructor, the government code has specific rules on how to become certified in school safety as a handgun instructor, where you can provide training. It's a 15 to 20 hour training process. Really not a bad plan to follow. And a lot of the local gun ranges are going to have that training and be able to provide that to your individuals that you select. So that's something that can certainly happen. But outside of that, it's really important to know as a school what the liability issues are. And we run into this all the time in our practice. We were talking with Dr. Potts and Laura, and rarely is there a quarter that'll go by where we won't get some firearm related question. Got one from a school here in the Dallas area just within this last quarter, and the question was, fourth grade boys went into the restroom, and the janitor, who was in the Guardian program, left his handgun there in the stall, and the fourth grade boys found it and they were good, didn't do anything. They went and they told their teacher. Lots of different issues that can. So from a school, it's really important. And I know as a school and as administrators, you're used to making sure that things are well supervised. This is an area where I would just call it supervision plus. You want to make sure that there is supervision and that there's training for your individuals, because what you're doing is you're asking an individual to bring a gun on school campus and in their own independent judgment, make a decision as to whether they need to use and discharge their weapon to keep kids safe. And the times that there is not a threat, they need to be trusted that they're going to be safe in their handling of the weapon and how they're, interacting and carrying and storing and all of those things. So when we talk about this, it's really important. Schools don't harm people as the entity. It's always either a volunteer or a staff member that is going to be the culpable person for harming. So the way that the lawsuit will look is if there is a child that's harmed by, let's just say a security guard accidentally discharges his weapon and somehow somebody is harmed. So the lawsuit is going to be the plaintiff, the harmed person and their family, versus the individual that actually did the negligent act. And then also the school is going to be a defendant in that as well. And the reason the school is the defendant has an insurance policy. There's oftentimes way more money in the insurance policy than what the individual employee has. Just pragmatically, they go after the insurance carrier. And three is that the school was negligent in how it selected that person. So negligent selection is the cause of action in the lawsuit. Negligent screening kind of goes with that. So you need to make sure that you screen these people really well. Background checks, interviews, what is your experience, those types of things. And then you go into negligent training is a big one as well. And when you think through, at a minimum, license to carry is such an easy thing. You can watch your classes online. It's, 4 to 5 hours of online instruction now. And then you go to a gun range. And my wife, hardly having shot in her entire life, she earned a perfect score on the license to carry exam when we took it a few years back. So it's really, she's a great shot. No offense to my wife, but it's a very low bar. I mean, anybody that's out there, you could go up and, you have plenty of time. It's not difficult to do. There's no pressure. There's no scenario-based training where you have to think through, tactics or any of those types of things. So very low bar. So what's going to happen is if you have a person and you don't provide or mandate from your board policy on the Guardian program, you don't require that additional training. And we'll talk about what that is here in just a minute. Then when the lawsuit comes, you'll be in a deposition or you'll be on the stand as the administrator, and you're going to get questions. What's more important, school safety, safety of the kids or money? Of course, school safety. And then they're going to go down the line, how much would it have cost for you to have sent this person to, 15 hours of training to make sure that they had great judgment in the decision making when these things pop up, that they knew how to use a firearm in the proper way, that they had their firearm inspected by somebody that knows what they were doing, that it's a safe firearm, it's appropriate for this type of a situation. You want to be able to look abundantly prepared, abundantly reasonable, and you want to say, yeah, we've taken this very serious. As a board, we wanted to put people in that their head was in the right place psychologically, they had the right equipment, and they were trusted to be able to carry out those duties in a reasonable manner. And that's only accomplished through training. So you can find just about any gun range. They have, if you just Google school guardian training opportunities, they'll have anywhere from 10 to 40 hours of training that you can provide for them, where they have to go, they have to shoot, they have to do scenario-based training. There's a psychological exam component that would be included there. And all of that, from that negligent training portion of it, you're making sure that you are discharging your standard of care, your legal duty, to make sure that that person is trained in the right way. So you've got the screening and the selection, you've got the training, but then the third cause of action that will pop up is negligent supervision. And you just want to make sure that they're supervised. You want to be able to check in. How are you storing your weapon? How are you, all the different questions that can come up. So you just want to make sure that you're locked in. So private school boards should consider eligibility and training requirements. And there's a note in the slide to mimic the Marshall Plan, which we're going to talk about here a little bit later. And you have that mindset that you as a school, you've not just said, hey, do you have a license to carry? All right, bring that gun, keep kids safe. I know nobody would do that. You want to make sure that you followed all of those things and that you're locked in on it and you have very careful records and you keep those records in a good place. That way, when litigation comes up, one of our biggest frustrations in our office is we have a very defensible case, but we don't have good record keeping from the evidence standpoint. And it's just coming now to what is the administrator saying versus what is the lawyer on the other side saying and accusing us of being so careless. So that's a broad overview of what the Guardian Plan is and what to watch out for. And Stephen will provide just some further overview on the legal side.
Yeah, thank you, Dustin. Yeah, and again, I'm not going to read this slide to you all. Certainly you can look up some of the information that's listed here, but the basic general legal basis for the Guardian program, we start with the general prohibition at the federal level that exists with respect to having guns in the school zone and in schools generally, and it doesn't apply when there's a contract entered into between the school and the individual or employer. And so that starts to open the door to the state involvement and the possibility of having someone who's armed in the school. The state law is Texas Penal Code 4603, places where weapons are prohibited, and that includes private schools unless, again, and it's mimicking sort of the federal here, unless it's pursuant to written regulations or written authorization of the institution. So you guys can kind of look up some of the statutory citations here, and I would also encourage you to look at the Texas Attorney General opinion that was mentioned on the prior slide, just to understand this, that there is a statutory basis, federal and state, underlying both of these programs. And like Dustin was saying, the Guardian program's got more flexibility, but it does admit of more decisions that have to be made, and you'll have to forgive us for not just throwing a cookie cutter plan out there. We don't believe that you should mimic the Marshall Plan, actually, but that you should take the very minimum standard and thoughtfully consider with legal counsel and your situation, your school board and insurance and others, what extra steps that you want to put in there for training, because it's really important to make sure and be thoughtful about the implementation of this. But that should show you all the Guardian Plan legal basis. And I will turn it back over to Dustin.
The next slide, it talks about, so I just talked about all of the scary things that can happen from a school standpoint. Just make sure, and if we can go back one more, Laura, to the immunity slide. There is immunity that is in place for schools. So immunity from liability. And Texas's statutes, there are several different places where charitable nonprofit organizations have immunity or caps on damages in certain places. But the big thing to think through, and we're not going to read through, we're not just going to read through the statute. We're going to provide these slides to you to go have afterwards, and you can review them later. Everything turns on the school's reasonable action, and every immunity statute that pertains to private schools and to individuals, and then the damage caps, those are limited oftentimes in different ways. So, reasonable action taken by security personnel. So it can be construed whether your training was a reasonable action. So was it reasonable for us when we trained this individual? Was it reasonable for us to tell this person that they can bring a gun to school and those things? So the good news is several things. You have insurance. And an important highlight here when we're thinking of, potential liability and damages, consult with your insurance carrier, let them know that you're following the Guardian program, ask if there's any additional coverages that can be available. always an important thing. Next thing is make sure, when you're going through that you're keeping great records like we talked about before. And we just want to make sure that we're behaving reasonably through this entire process and how we select them, how we screen them, how we train them, and how we supervise them. And there would be great immunity that's there. So you have insurance to be able to protect from the financial side. You have this to be able to protect from the financial side, but it's a privilege to have this immunity, and we have to show that we were reasonable in everything. Just like you wouldn't say to a guy off the street, hey, do you have a driver's license? Can you drive the bus to go take the kids on a field trip? You're going to do some background. You're going to make sure they have a CDL and all of those things. And that's just being reasonable in that. So immunity is there, but it certainly can be pierced. So we want to just be very sure and clear of that, especially when we're talking guns and those things. So as far as the Guardian plan is concerned, we'll keep it and reserve it for some questions at the end, but we're going to jump over and just do a very brief overview of the Marshall program. And what this one is, it's very different than the Guardian. When you think Guardian, you think very almost informal, a board decision. We're going to carve out, we're going to establish and forge our own path on training. School marshal is quite a bit different. And what school marshal is you're going to take an individual and you're going to place them through 80 hours of state provided training. And it's going to be akin to having a law enforcement officer, somebody with law enforcement qualifications, there on your property. And the rules are pretty stringent with the marshal program. So this was, recently passed, like Stephen described, from the 2013 to 14 legislature. And then in 2017 and 18, it was extended to private schools. So great opportunity for schools if you want to go on a more rigorous, a more regulated route, then the school marshal program really would be the opportunity for that. The training is, either free from the Texas Commission on Law Enforcement, or it can vary between $250 to $600 per class by other authorized providers. And you can find providers that are out there all over the place. There's a set statutory curriculum that goes. A big part of this, and you can incorporate this one into your Guardian program as well, but there is a psychological exam component. And we work with several different security groups for our church clients that we have. And if you attend church, a lot of churches will have a volunteer ministry where it's the safety team, where they'll bring their gun and conceal and carry, and they're there to keep everybody safe should there be an active shooter event. And our groups that we work with that have a psychological and a qualification round to it, I mean, this was just kind of shocking to me when I heard it, is that every church that they go into and they do the psych part of it, and they do the qualification part where they actually have to demonstrate competency with their handgun. They say that they fail out 25 to 33% of the then existing safety team at every church that they go into, which I couldn't believe that. I mean, that just means that 1 out of every 4 on my church's team, wouldn't make it. And we brought them into our church too, and we got it cleaned up, and they reassign people so people don't have, hurt feelings. But you have, folks that just don't have any business, the Barney Fife guy that's waiting for his big moment to be the hero and to act unreasonably. The psych exam is going to help with that. So it's a really important part that you can mimic, like we've talked about earlier, into your Guardian program, but that's one of the great parts of the school marshal program. And then the 80 hours of instructions on the occupations code. And, according to the Commission on Law Enforcement, its sole purpose is to prevent the act of murder or serious bodily injury, and just doing everything that we can to be able to keep kids safe in the school environment. So those are the major differences. Guardian, very flexible, but it does put the onus and burden on you to do that training. School marshal, way more regulated, way more, statutory requirements that are in there. But you have obviously, the training that you can outsource, and you have somebody that's way more certified after that. So great opportunities, but we're, honored to be able to, talk with you all today. And I think I'll turn it back over to Stephen to introduce this next session.
Yeah, we want to let Dr. Potts and Mr. Sells from Cypress Christian School take it from here with some of the implementation and practical issues that we were wanting to make sure to give sort of the legal background and basis and the theories of negligence and liability and and some of the issues that the flexibility of the Guardian program invites. I want to make sure that you guys get a very practical, hands-on view as well. So Dr. Potts, I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah, Laura, did we want to break there with legal questions, or you want me to just keep going?
Well, I don't see anything in the chat unless something's wrong with my chat. Does anyone have a legal question before we move to the practical application? How has Marshall stood up in court?
Yeah, I'm not aware.
So I think, go,
Dustin.
No, you got it. I was going to say the same thing, I think.
Well, I'm not aware of any case law that's been rendered on that with respect to liability. And Dustin, I don't know if in your research did you run across anything specific?
Yeah, no, what I would say though is, we have the immunity statute that we talked through just a minute ago. And on the immunity statute, if you've sent someone and they've gone through the school marshal program, then we talked about all that reasonableness that's in there. That reasonableness obviously is going to be satisfied because on the entity level. Now, maybe not for the marshal. If you have an individual marshal that completely goes off the reservation and he individually was not acting reasonably and according to training and all of those things, when the school part of it comes in, schools can only be sued for negligent selection, screening, training, supervision, those things. You're not going to have those issues if you've sent them out and they've satisfied. It's going to be very reasonable from the entity standpoint that way. So you're going to be way more protected because of that statutory training and the license given. That's completely outside. They're going to go through that training, and the state of Texas is going to issue licenses for that. So it will help, entities on that immunity aspect big time.
Okay, we use a private security company to provide our school with a security guard. Would this be considered separate than these programs? I think the answer is yes.
Yes.
You're the attorney.
Yeah, very, very different. Yeah, you're subbing it out completely. And Occupations Code has requirements for, bonded, licensed security providers. They have licensure from a private security standpoint. Pre-2018, even in churches, if churches told people to be armed, they would have to send them through that type of a program to do it correctly. But since you're doing that, you're outsourcing. I mean, that's the farthest step away from liability that you can have. You just have to be diligent that that person possesses the licenses, and there's the bonding and all the requirements from the Occupation Code are satisfied.
Although I would add, Dustin, to that we do both. We do have a Harris County constable during school hours and a separate contract there, as well as a Guardian program. One of the things that you can't have too many. A good security plan is layered, and we consider that as a primary layer. One of the more primary layers, and then a Guardian as a last resort. So just because you have one doesn't mean you can't have both, and that's what we've chosen to do.
Yeah.
And that Texas Attorney General opinion letter sort of even explored the idea of having a marshal and a Guardian. And so to Dr. Potts' point, that multi-layered approach is important, and it invites discussions about budgets and expense and those sorts of practical issues. So it's, a lot to kind of balance and weigh out.
Yeah, and Natalie asked, we have a Guardian. We're cited by childcare licensing for having a weapon on campus. There was permission from the board, et cetera. How do we handle that situation? I don't think you can get around childcare licensing, but I'll let the attorneys decide.
Yeah, we would want to handle that one. I mean, send us an email on that. I don't know how recent it was, are those things, but this is new-ish legislation. So a lot of times we just would have to handle that one on an individual basis and see what we could do to get the fee and the fine, removed and those types of things. But we'd be able to talk through that.
Yeah, and I did have a conversation years ago with childcare licensing, and they were not willing to budge on it. So I don't think we can get a bill passed to remove that. We're hoping for that. And I think, Julie, we answered your question already about the retired police officer. I'm assuming if you have retired police officers who still have right to carry as your safety security team, these two plans are not applicable. I think the point was you could do both, right?
Yep.
Okay. And this will be the last one because I want to make sure Jeff and Drew get into the nitty gritty here. If the employee is paid to provide security and job description
requires them to provide security, can the employee be considered a guardian? Security commission required.
Yeah, and so this is one of those situations where it gets into, you get 4 attorneys in a room and maybe there's 6 opinions, and in some respects we're guilty of that a little bit. But the employment considerations, we mostly work with volunteers. When we start getting into the paying a stipend or paying them as part of their duties, it does alter some of the considerations that exist, and we would need to do that outside of a public webinar like this to get down into that kind of detail. Dustin, I don't know if you've got anything else to add to that.
No, I agree completely. We would have to get way too. Yeah.
Okay. And Barbara said that they requested an exemption from childcare licensing because K3 and K4 are a significant part of the school. It was approved. Now I'm surprised, but well done you. With that exemption, the weapon would be allowed at the school. So it looks like there is an exemption process. And I can't remember who put that on there, but if you want to email me, if y'all need more information, my email will be at the end and I can connect people that need to talk. Okay, so Jeff and Drew, the Cypress Christian guys who have been through this. So I will let you all take it away.
Okay, well, thank you, Laura. I think what Drew and I would just say is that we've been doing this he and I both been doing this since the inception of the law in 2007. And we have learned some things that I hope will be passed along. We're here. I don't know that there's a better investment of anyone's time instead of in lieu of just making other kids safe. So we're here. I've had the privilege and it's my honor to talk to people, just let them know what we learned, sometimes the hard way, sometimes the public way. The first thing I would tell you is for us as a Christian organization, we prayed about it in each and every scenario and what it is that our school, we're in the Christian school business. And so that's part of our methodology and the board's methodology. Is this something that we're being called to do? And then where we're talking about, we have been involved with the school guardian program and stuck with the school guardian program, although when the school marshal program was introduced, what we decided was that the guardian program was sufficient for us. Now, Stephen and Dustin, we've worked with for these 15 years. They've done a great job, and they've done a great job here today as well. They are making sure that we're legal. But I would say to you that from my perspective, this is not nearly as daunting as what some of the legal ease that Stephen and Dustin are keeping us on the straight and narrow with. It is not nearly that daunting if you want to do this. I grew up in a 6-man football town in the Hill Country, northwest of Austin, and we were 17 miles from any first responders. And before there ever was a consideration, I always knew that our superintendent or principal had plans to take care of a violent intruder, and I didn't know what they were. But the most important thing I think for you is choosing the right person. Somebody mentioned Barney Fife earlier. That is the last person that you want to be involved. And the question comes up, well, how many are the right number? The right number are the right people, whether it be 2 individuals that serve as guardians or 4 individuals. You don't want a number to force you to choose someone that is not the right mental makeup. So whenever you think about this, I'm looking for someone, and I myself and my wife and I prayed about and looked at and decided that, if it came down to it, was I willing to give my life to save the life of a kid? Absolutely. I've got 3 here, and in many ways, they're all mine. I did an interview in 2018. We went public, and I'll talk about this in a minute. We went public. It was in North Texas at the time, and Tarrant County Sheriff Bill Wayburn came on, and we did an interview with the local Fox affiliate, and it rapidly went national, and there was a lot of people criticizing us. But one of the things that I said then was the reporter asked, what's the definition of success? And this was on the heels of the Florida shooting. And I said, you know what? The definition of success, as I see it, is if the tragedy took 18 lives under normal circumstances, and with the Guardian program would still take 18 lives, but include mine instead of a child's, that would be the definition of success. And you've got to have somebody that gets that, really. and somebody that understands that they are a last line of defense. They're never going to be, the training will teach this. This is a part of a multi-layered security plan or crisis management plan. This is the last layer. We have Harris County deputies, as I mentioned earlier, but as you have seen in previous video from previous tragedies, you can see people whenever the tragedy occurs making what I would call business decisions instead of running towards the fight. And what I would say is what the Guardian Plan does is put someone, the best case for it, at least in my opinion, is it puts someone on campus who is trained and able as last line of defense and willing to give their life, who loves and knows the kids in the building. And a lot of times whenever you see the failure, in my mind, I think that what you're watching is somebody making a business decision. And then you see heroes who are mothers who break loose and run in right past officers, and they're not making a business decision. They're trying to save lives. One of the things also in selecting the right people is somebody who is calm, even demeanored, who has a background. They don't have to be former military. They don't have to be former law enforcement, but they do need to be somebody who is very familiar, not somebody that would have to go out and buy their first handgun. Somebody asked me that one time. I want to do this. My board's in support. Where would you suggest I go buy a gun? I want to hang up right now. That was a terrible, that wasn't good. So what I would say to you is it's looking at the right people. And if you don't know who the right people are, then, or if you have a question in your mind, then you probably don't have someone that you're ready to, and you can start working with them. We have a program whereby we have school guardians, and then we have those that we're developing over the next year who go to the ongoing training with us. And whenever the licensing individual that does the training says they're ready, that's whenever they go through the training. And then a very important distinction that I learned in 2018 in the news. People don't read the news. They read the headlines, and the Dallas Morning News had an op-ed where somebody wrote it and they hadn't even watched the story. We do not have classroom teachers who are guardians or marshals. And there's obvious reasons for that. We have individuals who are either support, they could be in athletics, they could be administrators, but I don't want someone trying to make sure that, this is a personal opinion, this isn't the law, but I don't want my fifth grader's teacher trying to maintain classroom organization and discipline along with my son's ADHD as well as muzzle control. It just is not something that is recipe for success. The other thing that you have to consider whenever you're doing this is whether you're going, because if your board approves this, you go through the training, you become a guardian, then you have to decide whether or not you want to be public about it or whether you want to be private about it. A lot of schools had done this prior to 2016, 17, or 18, but had not made it public. And right around that time, many public schools and a lot of private schools began going public with it. And the reason is because many experts consider it to be best practice. The number one question you'll get if you do decide to go public is, well, and the parent will ask you, well, aren't you making us a bigger target? And the answer is no. If you look back at when we had to harden the courthouses, the courtrooms, secure those, people that would be these violent intruders, they're looking for a soft target. And whenever you go back and look at the last 25 years, whenever they had to harden those courthouses and places like that, that's when you really saw a spike in soft targets, be it churches or schools, really suffering. And so that is something that, and we have a sign that's posted. We have 7 signs. And the message is, don't come here, go somewhere else. So from a practical standpoint, your governing agency, we have a self-perpetuating board. It can be a little bit, depending on the culture of your board in school, it can be a little bit of a daunting thing where they want to support it. I've asked before we initiated it at any school, I've asked that it be 100% supported. And if they're not ready, if somebody's got questions or they need to think about it, I want them, practically speaking, to do that. And then the training issue is something that not only is very important at whenever you do go through it, but as has already been stated, it needs to be ongoing. And I'm going to ask Drew Sells, who has been doing this since 2007. He's also one of the most prepared, most trained individuals from training with SWAT teams in North Texas and in South Texas, to talk about both what you could expect in the Guardian training, which is 16 to 20 hours. And, it's not easy. And that's a good thing that it's not easy. And I'm going to turn it over to him.
All right. Hello. Good morning. So when we go to start training, I'm going to give you kind of a priority of process. And the first question that I would ask is, can I hit or can I shoot a stationary target while in a non-stressful environment while stationary? And that's the first question you have to ask. If you struggle with that, then your training would go around that topic right there. So I would start shooting and learning how to have good trigger control without movement, without stress. And then the process kind of goes from there. So once I am confident in my ability to shoot a stationary target, like was mentioned earlier, the LTC training, you can take someone that's never shot a gun before and they can pass that LTC training with no problem. And so that's not what we want while on a school campus in public with children in a chaotic situation. And so your training starts from there. So once you can confidently say yes, one area, everybody goes to the range, and there's a lot of range rules, and we shoot in a situation where I'm shooting with muzzle control, trigger control, never holstering a gun, never, the environment is safe, very predictable. And that's not the training that you do under the School Guardian program. So once I start layering this up, the next position I would train at is with a holster. So I want to take a gun from a concealed holster and then shoot. That's something that a lot of us don't do very often. And once I'm comfortable with that, I want to take a gun from a concealed holster and I want to start adding stress. Stress is when my heart rate elevates. Stress is when movement of target takes place. Stress is anything that is not out of the ordinary that I have not trained at under that target where I'm sitting there shooting at a stationary target with a heart rate that's very normal. I want to get out of that situation because we all know, heaven forbid this happens, it's nothing when stress takes our vision. And the Guardian program really trains you on stressful situation. It trains you on that dopamine drip that you get under the circumstance. And so you want to try to, in a safe environment, add stress. And the best way to do that is movement and heartbeat elevation type situations. Once we do that, I want to, if I'm in a situation where I have other marshals or guardians at the school, a lot of our training came in unison with a partner. Not often have I ever, before this program, shot with somebody in a situation that was tactical in nature. And so you're building a relationship with a person, and it's a trust relationship. I'm learning how to move and shoot in an environment with a partner. And so once that trust is maintained, and so now I get into scenario training. And I think what you see on the internet a lot of time is we talk about scenario training, and you'll see it on School Guardian trainers' websites. It's scenario training. Well, I can't go through a scenario training if I can't even hit what I'm looking at while my feet are stationary and there's no stress. And so I can't go into a scenario training and have confidence that I'm shooting live fire with a partner if I've never done that. And so I remember it was a 6 to 8 month process of scenario training. And the first 3 months there was no scenario. We were just learning how to shoot, and we were guys that we thought we could shoot pretty good anyway. And so when you start adding stress and movement to the environment, it takes a whole new world. So just to recap, I think can I shoot stationary, add stress in layers, and then let's get to a scenario.
So along those same lines, I would add to that the training that you would go through with someone that was licensed to or authorized through the Texas Department of Public Safety to license you through this 16 to 20 hour course, it ought to be hard, and it ought to be something that is not a rubber stamp. The training that we have been through, and there's different people that will do it. It was hard. It included hand-to-hand combat drills. It included a psychological portion of it because we went through and had to watch the video from the Sandy Hook crime scene before they moved the children's bodies. There were people in that class that could not watch that, and the rationale behind that. And they said, if you can't watch it, no judgment at all. But in a crisis scenario such as this, you have to be willing to see that and move towards the threat to save other people's lives. And so, it's something that is excellent. It'll make you better. It'll help you. But I would also say one of the questions I get, there's this idea, this notion that this is something for men. In my experience and people I've trained with, and I think a lot of trainers, whether it be LTC trainers or those that are working on active shooter or tactical shooting, will tell you that the best students are women. It presents itself because men, we think we already know it all and we're not easily teachable. Sheriff Wayburn in Tarrant County had trained at the time, and this was 10 years ago, over 7,000 individuals. And he would say he would train women and women's classes exclusively if he could, because they didn't know it all and they would be interested in learning and they were better students. I would say that I will not get into how you conceal carry as a guardian as a female, because I don't know. But you can Google it. I made that mistake one time on behalf of somebody. I'm not going to look it up. But there are also regulations regarding how you can store a weapon on campus. We happen to have in certain locations authorized mechanical safes that meet a certain requirement and are bolted into the concrete floor. So some 8th grade knucklehead can't come in and break it open. But those are all sorts of things. The training also includes one of the biggest threats they will tell you is after the event is over, interacting and securing yourself with the arrival of law enforcement so that you don't become and our law enforcement in our area has our pictures. Now, whether or not they actually look at it on their laptop as they're arriving on scene, our local responding authorities know who our guardians are. And nevertheless, it'll be important to train on how to interact with first responder law enforcement. And I'll leave you with this. Sheriff Wayburn said at the time, he's a friend of mine, and I talked to him quite regularly. He's a great man, but he said in that interview that these things nationally, the response time of law enforcement in the U.S. is about 7 minutes. And he said one trained individual responding in 1 or 2 minutes is better than 100 SWAT officers responding in 7 minutes. And that's something that I think really resonated with me and really sort of drove what the rationale behind what it is why we chose what we did. And I think, we'll sit here and answer questions as long as anyone would like to ask them, Laura, and I'm assuming since Dustin and Stephen are here still as well, but we would just want to help. And I would add that we've had the privilege of talking to a lot of schools, and we don't make anything, we don't charge anything. If this can help you, since we're all in the kid business, there's not anything more important. I say that as Jeff Potts. Stephen and Dustin, they might, if you have a scenario, but they've been great. I've worked with them for 15 years and they do it all. And they are especially good with schools and nonprofits and churches.
Thank you, all of you. This has been incredible. Shannon said, "Go ladies." I like that in the chat. That they're better, can take the training better.
Thanks for listening. To join us live next week,